Mister.
Hey everyone, Miss Dempsey here. This is a guide for round 4 of the Manufacturer series, and since this is taking place on numbering 24 hour, I'll speed this up and try to make this guide a little quicker, but anyways, let's get this started. Start to brake when your car reaches the 150 meter board that is on your left. This should give you just enough space to be able to make this turn really nicely. You'll be taking advantage of the apex as there's a little dip and it'll help your car rotate a bit more. That should set you up nicely for this next turn and slowly start to accelerate your way through. Then for this next turn, start to brake right after the path on the right ends and bring yourself into the left side of the track as you'll need to brake before the curb on the left ends. Once again, slowly bring yourself in and gently accelerate your way out. You have to be gentle with the acceleration as the car likes to step out a little bit. Then brake when the curb on the left starts, and once again slowly bring yourself in and very gently accelerate your way out. It's really easy to mess up over here as I almost did here. Then for this chicane, slowly ease off of the throttle and then bring it back in as you hit the apex. Shortly after the tarmac on the right starts, you'll start to brake, bring yourself in, hit the apex and slowly accelerate. Then before the curb on the right starts, you want to hit the brakes and slowly start to accelerate. This turn goes a little long, so you want to be careful about that and make sure you don't go too wide. For this chicane, you want to start to brake before you reach the 50 meter mark. You need to keep at least 2 wheels on the track as it can be easy to get a penalty through here. Then bring yourself to the right side of the track and you need to brake right here. The apex for this turn is very late, so you want to bring yourself very nicely into the apex before you start to fully accelerate. Then start to brake right after you pass the pit wall that is on your right, and you can bring yourself a bit into the pit lane to give yourself a bit more space for this next turn right here. Since this turn is going a bit downhill, you want to be a little careful and gently start to accelerate once you hit the apex. Gently ease off the throttle as you go through this turn and then get back on full throttle. And then for this turn, you want to look for a dirt patch that is on the right, as it's highlighted right here. That's going to be your braking point, and then you want to be very careful as you accelerate out of here. You want to make sure that the car doesn't step out. Then do some short bursts of braking through these 2 turns, and then start to brake when the tarmac changes from a lighter to a darker color. You need to be careful right here. Don't take too much advantage of the curb as there's a little hill that can screw you over. And when your car is pointing towards this apex right here, that's where you can start to fully accelerate. When you reach the dip that is right after the top of this hill right here, ease off of the throttle, and when you hit the first apex, you can slowly start to apply more throttle. If you want to be safe, you can apply just a tiny bit of braking to slow down just a little bit and continue to safely go through that turn. Apply a tiny bit of braking when you reach this sign on the right here, and then bring yourself into the apex and then start to brake before the curb on the left ends. This will give you just enough space to make it to this next turn, and then you can start to slowly accelerate when you hit the apex. As you go up the hill, look for a patch of dirt that is on the right. That's going to serve as your braking point. This will give you just enough time to brake and enter this apex at a safe speed. Then brake a bit more, bring yourself in, and then brake when you reach the crosswalk. And once again, be very careful through here as it's a little easy to spin out, but once you're pointing towards the next section, you can then start to fully accelerate. Then for this next turn coming up, once you start to pass the sign that is on the right, you can start to brake just a little bit. This will bring you in, and then you can go back to full throttle. Then look for this writing on the tarmac as you'll start to brake right after you pass it. This turn also goes a bit in, so you want to be careful and start to accelerate a little bit later. Then brake right after you pass this sign that is on the left, but don't brake as late as I do because I go a little too deep here. Then go for the late apex and then you can start to fully accelerate. For this chicane, ease off on the throttle, hit both apexes, and then start to brake before you reach the curb on the right. You're going to be looking for the second curb, which is the apex you'll be aiming for. Once you hit it, you can slowly start to accelerate. Then you want to brake here, as this will give you just enough distance to make it to this next turn. Brake hard, then start to ease up on the braking for the next turn. Then for the hairpin, you want to brake a bit more. When you're exiting the turn, you can short shift here to make sure that the car is still stable. Before the curb on the right ends, you want to start to brake and bring yourself in. Then get yourself on the left side and brake when the curb on the left ends and slowly start to accelerate through here. Don't go full throttle right away as the surface is a little uneven and you can potentially lose control. For this next turn, you'll be looking for the Yokohama sign on the right as you will start to brake before you reach it. This turn is a little tricky, so brake in a straight line going alongside the outside of the track, then slowly bring yourself in. When you see the curbs, you can slowly start to accelerate, but make sure that you're nearly parallel with them as you'll be able to safely exit the turn that way. When the gray curb on the right is about to end, you will give a quick burst of braking. This should slow your car down just enough to make it through this turn. However, make sure that quick burst is not too short, as you'll see here I almost end up going off track, so you want to be a little careful. This turn can be taken at full throttle, but you can ease off the throttle if you want, and then before the curb on the left starts, you want to start to brake. This is a very hard braking zone, so you want to brake in a straight line and then go for a late apex. Carefully accelerate your way through, as once again this car will start to lose control if you accelerate too much too early. Then look for the happy little tree on the left as you will start to brake once you pass it. Try to get yourself into the carousel and use a little bit of throttle as you go through it, and when your car is starting to point towards the next section of the track, carefully start to accelerate your way through. Take this left-handed turn at full throttle and then start to brake before the curb on the right starts. Use a little bit of throttle through these turns right here and then start to brake before you pass the path that is on the right. This turn is a tiny bit tricky as it can be easy to lose control. Just use a little bit of throttle, then start to use a bit more throttle. Ease off the throttle for this turn, then brake hard right here for a short moment. Then use a little bit of throttle to maintain control of the car, and then brake when the curb on the left ends. Stay on 4th gear, go through here, and then brake right here, then stay on 3rd gear. Look for the curb that is on the left, which happens to be gray, and you will start to brake when that curb is about to end. This turn is a tiny bit long, so you want to be a little easy on the throttle. Then brake when the curb on the left ends, and once again be very easy on the throttle as this turn is a little bit long. Then brake before the curb on the left starts, and once again this turn is a little long, so be careful with that. Go at full throttle through here and then start to brake right before you make the jump. You have to brake right here to make sure you don't end up on the wall. Then once you hit the apex, you can gradually start to accelerate, and you want to ease up on the throttle when you go through this turn right here, or before you go through this turn right here, because there's a tiny little jump and your car will gain just enough air to actually hinder the car from steering. So ease off the throttle before you make that jump. Look for the digital flag that is on the right as you will start to brake right before you pass it. Go up full braking power for a moment, then ease off of the braking so you can start to trail brake and bring yourself into the inside. Then brake right here and bring yourself inside as well, and then you want to start to brake before the curb on the left ends. bring yourself into the mini carousel and carefully accelerate your way out. Then start to brake before the curb on the left ends, and try to be careful not to hit the curb right here that is on the inside, as that can cause your car to become very unstable and potentially end up on the grass. Ease up on the throttle as you go through this turn and then gradually start to accelerate your way through. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the clip to save just a little bit more time. And here we go. So the next thing you will want to do is start to brake when the curb on the right ends. This is your best braking point. This will give you just enough space to make it through the second to last turn. Be very gentle with the throttle, as it's very easy to potentially lose control here. And that is it. You are done with one lap. Let's go ahead and talk about the strategy in a moment. For both strategies that I picked up on, you will be pitting one time. The only difference is what you'll be doing when you're in the pit stop. Here you'll see the first practice run I did, and this was with racing medium tires. So at the end of lap 2, I'll be going into the pit stop and I'll be refueling and switching tires. Speaking of refueling, you want to try to stretch out the fuel life as much as you can. If I recall correctly, you start with about 1.8 laps worth of fuel, so you want to try to stretch that out. A good way of trying to stretch it out is when you're getting close to approaching a turn, you bring the fuel map up so you are going towards a leaner fuel setting, and then when you exit a turn, you can gradually bring it back. There are certain sections where you can keep the fuel map at a certain place. So for this part right here, leading up to the carousel, you can leave it at fuel map 6 because you won't be needing the power for too much time over here. And the section that follows this part over here, you can leave it at fuel map 4. So not this part right here. Here you can go at fuel map 1, but it's this part starting right here where you can bring it up to fuel map 3 and eventually fuel map 4. This part gets pretty twisty, so you don't need all the power. There's another part of the Nordschleife version where you can have it at fuel map 4 for a while, and I'll bring that up when I'm talking about the racing hard clip. But again, once you see here, and this applies for both racing medium and hard tire stints, just leave it at fuel map 4. You'll be saving a bit of fuel, and you should still be able to keep up with the pace. And over here, when you're getting close to reaching the top of the hill, you can gradually bring up the fuel mapping just to try to save just a tiny bit more fuel. And once again, you're trying to stretch out that fuel life, and you're trying to spend less time in the pit stop refueling and all that stuff. And in a moment we'll be entering the pit stop, but in the meantime, let's take a look at the tires. So my tires are half worn, and brake balance I had it on was brake balance +1, so the tires are a little bit even, and I almost lose it right there because I'm not getting all the grip that I need. And here we go, switching to medium tires, and I'll be refueling. So let's go ahead and go through this cutscene because I want to show you how long it took for the pit stop to happen. Bring it up to about 50% should be more than good enough for me, and it took a total pit time of 17.5 seconds. 12.5 of that was getting all the action done, refueling and changing tires. So in a moment we'll be switching over to my practice run with racing hard tires. I just want to show you the times I ended up getting on the 3 laps, which you can see on the right side of the screen. I think on lap 3 I ended up making a huge error, so take that into account. And that's one thing you need to make sure, is to make sure that you nail every single turn. But anyway, so we're gonna go ahead and switch on over to the racing hard stint, and here I'm going to show you where you can also bring it to fuel map 4. So it's in this section over here where you can do it, because there's a lot of twists and turns, so you don't need all the power that fuel map 1 offers. And with the racing hard tires, you can last all 3 laps with them, you don't need to change tires. All you have to do is just refuel when you enter the pit stop. And in a bit we will see how long it takes to complete the pit stop. But for now, I just want to show you how the tires are looking like. And here on lap 2, the tires are still looking good. And notice how I'm in the GP section starting lap 2 and I'm still adjusting the fuel mapping, because I want to try to save as much fuel as I can while maintaining pace, spend less time in the pit stop, and potentially overtake someone in the pit stop. So when you're doing this race, that's something you should be thinking about, whether you're in racing hards or racing mediums. And yeah, with racing hards, you're obviously going to be a bit slower than those in the racing mediums. But if you can stay a couple seconds behind the folks with racing medium tires, then you could definitely get an overtake done when you're in the pit stop. The only thing is that, let's say all of you pit at lap 2, so you come out ahead of the folks who had to change tires, so you're a couple of seconds ahead, and you're going to have to defend the heck out of your position, and try to really defend your position in the Grand Prix section, because once you enter the Nordschleife version, it's going to be very hard to get an overtake done on you. The only problem is when you hit the back straight, that's where they could potentially get an overtake on you. But if you have them behind you all the time, then you're doing a pretty good job. Here, I'm just refueling. That's all I'm doing. Trying to get myself to 50%. And let's go ahead and see how long it takes. 13.6 seconds. And I refuel for 8.5 of those seconds. So let's take a quick look at the pit times. So on mediums, I took 17.5 seconds because I had to change tires. And for racing hards, it took me 13.6 seconds. So obviously the latter option is good if you want to spend as little time on the pit stop. But the thing is that when you're on the final lap, especially towards the end, your tires are going to be suffering, whereas the folks on medium tires, they're most likely going to have fresher tires unless they pit it on lap 1. So that's something you should be thinking about. But another thing is that if you're in a manufacturer where the tire wear rate is actually good on your car, then you can possibly run the racing hard stint. With Aston Martin, the Vintage GT3, as you see there, it gets pretty sketchy, so I would suggest using the racing medium stints. But anyways, let's go ahead and quickly recap what I've talked about here before I sign off. Okay, for a quick recap, stretch your fuel life to last 2 laps by short shifting and adjusting your fuel mapping where possible. And if you start on racing medium tires, pit for tires and fuel. If you start on racing hard, only pit for fuel. And for Aston Martin folks, racing hard stint is a little sketchy, so I would suggest using the racing medium stints, as that's a little safer. And for the love of all things holy, do not enter the shadow realm. But anyways, that is all I have for this guide. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Non-commentary version is coming up. But anyways, this is Mr. MCA, wishing you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.